Hello, welcome back, and let me welcome you to a new year. It's hard to believe it's now 2026, which actually is a great segue into what we're going to be talking about this week. After a month or so, I think, in 1 Samuel, we're ready to start chapter 2. And chapter 2 is very appropriate for the beginning of a new year because we left off with a bit of a cliffhanger. And we might say, what's happening next? And we see that David's at a big place in his life. And I think for me, I don't know about you, sometimes the new year is a place for a lot of contemplation and thinking about what happens next. And so I think we're going to have some great lessons today. So let's think about, where did we leave off? Just a very brief summary here. David had been in Ziklag after a time when he had basically gone a little bit astray. But he's now back. God had directed him back. And a man had come to him with news, a man we didn't know much about. Turned out he was a dishonest man in some ways, but he also did share news that David did not know, that he had a profound loss of his king, of his friends, including his best friend Jonathan. That man with the news was trying to get ahead and promote himself. Some things he said were clearly not true because they were against what Scripture tells us about the manner of death of Saul and Jonathan. And so he was executed. He was an example of a fleshly man. David is an example of a spiritual man. This was a place of strength in his life. He gave a great eulogy, not just a personal one, but to the nation. Yet, the king is still dead. And so, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen to David? What's going to happen to Israel? Because they had been in defeat. They had not just lost their king, they had lost the battle. They were running scared. Is there going to be a new king? Who will be the new king? Can Israel make a comeback? And what's going to happen to David? So, we can go through a similar process. I mean, David's is pretty dramatic. Hopefully yours is not that dramatic. But as you take time, as we've ended a year, we're now still in just a few days into the new year, sometimes it's good to take stock, to do a review and a summary of your 2025, for better or for worse, and to take inventory of what's working, what's not working, what's going to happen next in 2026. And people are making all kinds of decisions, so-called New Year's resolutions. They can run the gamut of a lot of things. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of all the various, things that we might encounter in our world. They may be good for you, they may not. But I want to talk about the process. And as we're picking back up here in 2 Samuel, I think David can provide a good spiritual example for us as we go through this very natural process. So this is verse 1, chapter 2. After this, David inquired of the Lord. That's always safe ground. It's the first and most important thing. And often we get in a hurry. We think of a best-selling book or something that's a fad or that's popular now. And there's new things this year that were different than last year and that would be different next year. But this is a uniform safe harbor. David inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up into the cities of Judah?" The Lord said to him, "Go up." And David said, "To which shall I go up?" He said, "To Hebron." Now, I was looking this up. This is not the first time that David had done this. I looked back at 1 Samuel. There were several times before he did this. And as we're going to look ahead, we're going to note it coming up in future chapters as well. It was part of his life most of the time. Except, when he didn't do it? When he engaged in his sinful, fallen behavior. If you think about it, if we inquire of the Lord, it can be a great leader of where to go. It can also give us direction of where not to go. Sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is different. But I want to give you this promise. David is an example, but of course this is all about application for us as well. If you're facing crossroads, if you're facing decisions, if you're thinking about what to do, hang on to this promise. James 1:5, I love this verse. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. Not conditional. It's a promise. I think about David's son Solomon, who would succeed him, and that was a pattern he followed. He asked for wisdom as well. He didn't ask for riches. He didn't ask for power. Wisdom is a great thing. I encourage you to inquire of the Lord. However, if you're going to do it, if you're going to inquire, you've got to be able and ready to receive the answer. It may be exactly what you want. It may be something different. But David got the answer, and so he went up there. And you know what? If that's the answer we get, we need to do it as well. We do have, though, a little foreshadowing of some of his problems, because it specifically mentions he already at this point has the 2 wives. Again, he's still in a strong place, but this kind of is a little foreshadowing of his weakness, which will be his Achilles heel over time, as it is for many. But he also brought up his men who were with him and everyone with his household, and they lived in the towns of Hebron. So he went, and he was a leader. He took his family, he took the people who were with him. Our actions also affect others, for good or for bad. In this case, this was good. He's following the correct will. Just, we're not going to take the time to look at them all, just in the interest of time, but think about some other examples that we have like this. Abram. He went to a land he did not know, but when he was given that direction, he went, and he took his household with him. Think of Moses. It was very hard what he was asked to do. He'd been in the backside of the desert. He had to go confront Pharaoh, but he did it. I think of even prophets. Some went quicker, but some were like Jonah. They first did not do it and had suffered consequences for it, and they eventually did it. Or even how Jesus said to his disciples, leave those nets, leave your fishing and come and follow me. So I encourage you to inquire, but you got to be willing and able. We always want to get reinforcement of what we want to do, and it's wonderful when that reinforcement is exactly what we're thinking about. But we have to be prepared. What if the answer is different? Are we still prepared to go? And we should. We need to do it. We need to follow through. Now, something else that came to my mind as we were thinking about this is there's a lot of mention here about Hebron. And you may not be so familiar with Hebron, but Hebron's a very important place. So I wanted to just take a minute or two to make sure we understand, because David's going to end up spending over 7 years here, so we're going to be parked here for a while, so maybe it's good to think about it. It's a very, very old city. Obviously, we're talking about the time of David, but it precedes that. Its name, etymology, can be derived as a colleague, friend, alliance, that kind of picture. It goes all the way back to the time of Abraham and Sarah, and then later Isaac and Jacob. So this has been part of Israel's history for almost basically the beginning, going back to Abraham. And it talks about it there in Scripture, where he came into the land and he came into Hebron. He built an altar there. His wife was buried there. He was buried there. Other patriarchs were buried there. And so, it's been there a long time. And it's not that far. I believe it's approximately 20 or 30 miles or so from Jerusalem to Hebron, south of Jerusalem, just if you want to kind of picture where it's at. This is it today, where they've kept a lot of it. And I wanted to mention in particular, this is called the Cave of the Patriarchs here, and it is believed, and it's sealed up. King Herod was the one that built this, And it's actually an area with a lot of dispute, because this is also an important area for people of Islam as well, as Jewish people as well as Christians. So this is really a thought after city as well. But as we think about even today, in the last few years, this is an area that it's still a thought after, a divided area. But for the Jewish people, it would be the second most important city, only after Jerusalem. Just so you can, since we're going to be here for a while, and this is going to be the beginning of David's reign, and he's going to be here for 7 years, I wanted to give you some background on that. Now, notice this. He inquired, he was willing to follow through, and he walked in blessing. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. They anointed him. He wasn't seeking it. He received it. And when they told David it was the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul, David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, "May you be blessed by the Lord, because you showed this loyalty to Saul your Lord and buried him. And may the Lord show steadfast love and faithfulness to you, and I will do good to you because you have done this thing. Now therefore let your hands be strong, be valiant. Saul your Lord is dead, and the house of Judah has anointed me king over them." Now, understand, at this point, getting into the geography of it, he is not king of all of Israel. He is king of Judah. We'll talk more about that story. But he has been anointed the king. And it was a long road. Sometimes things take a while. If we go back to 1 Samuel 16, he was unexpectedly anointed as a very, very young man. Really still on the cusp of a boy man. And he slayed Goliath at that time. He was already showing the type of man he would be. But now, we will find out in 2 Samuel 5, it says that David was 30 when he was first anointed. 30 is a very important age in the Bible. So over a decade had passed. And, of course, he had many battles, physically, spiritually, emotionally. And many more battles are still going to remain for him. Some are going to be very wonderful victories, some are not. But this promise, sometimes there's a gap between a promise and when it's fulfilled. Sometimes it's a very long time period. But in an earthly sense, understand that this promise was a fulfillment going back to 1 Samuel 16. So, David's at this place in his life, as we open up 1 Samuel 2, of a crossroads. And so we are in a new year. So what happens next? We're seeing what happens next for David. We have to all think about what happens next in our life. So there's lessons from David, lessons for us. We take our inventory. We think about where we're at, what's good or what's bad. But first, can I encourage you, if you have not, inquire of the Lord. It's important to pray, so important to listen. Sometimes we just lay out our list. It's good to pray, but it's also very important. And don't just hear the response you want to hear, but be open to that response. But when you hear the response, then you go and you do it. You don't question it. You don't do a Jonah. Ask, but be prepared to receive whatever that answer may be. Third, that doesn't mean it's always easy, just like it wasn't for David. He's had battles, and sometimes we feel like we're being led and we have a promise, and sometimes things just happen bam, bam, bam. And sometimes, like in the case of David here, years may pass. Sometimes it takes a long period of time. We're in a place where we always want these immediate results, and sometimes that's how it is. But I guarantee you this. If you truly, openly inquire, if you seek wisdom, if you're willing to follow his leading, you will have blessing. The blessings will occur. The blessings will always be there. Sometimes they're more apparent Sometimes they're more physically observable, but the blessings will be there. Think about some things we can learn from David. Think about things we can apply to our life today. I first of all just want to say, David was invoking a blessing upon those people. I'd like to invoke a blessing upon you in this 2026. I pray that you would do these things and you would be led and you would have a wonderful start to your new year.